Hello, everyone. Welcome to Talk Birth to Me podcast. This is going to be women's journeys throughout pregnancy and birth. We will be discussing infertility, treatments, and different types of births such as C-sections or natural births. If that is something that might be a trigger to you, feel free to see the title at the beginning, and we will always list what it's about. So if that's something that you are uncomfortable with, feel free to exit and join us at another episode. I hope you're doing well today, mentally, physically, and spiritually. Sit back and enjoy this special story from one of our friends. It only lets me record for 40 minutes unless I pay for premium, which I want to one day, but
right.
I'll just do this for fun. It's not happening right now.
I understand.
I do want to thank you for jumping on me today so that we can hear your story and about your journey and how it was special to you or how you might be able to help someone who's in the same shoes as you. So thank you for jumping on here with me today. And I just want to give you the floor, kind of tell us a little bit about yourself and where you started out and go from there.
Okay. So yes, my first pregnancy, she was planned. Everything went really well throughout the first pregnancy. I had a little girl. My pregnancy went out pretty good. I had a little bit of morning sickness. And then my main thing that helped me during my morning sickness was peppermints. Like I just, let's see. Do I need to keep my video on? I'm sorry. But there was
No, you're totally fine. I just muted just in case one of my children bang down the door, because they will. And I turned the video off just because if it records my face the whole time, I'm gonna be like, really? So I just
okay.
You're completely fine though. You do whatever you want to do, and I'm just gonna listen.
Okay, thank you. So pretty much, yeah, I would get some morning sickness in the beginning, and then whenever I felt sick, I would eat a peppermint, and then it would help me. And then I guess there was one time that like I got tremendously sick. I took like a really, really hot shower, and I immediately like felt very faint afterwards. And then I thought I was going to throw up. And my husband sort of just jumped out of the bed, and I was getting ready for church, and he was like, "Oh my goodness, are you okay?" And I was like, "No, I think I'm going to puke. Like I need help. I'm sick." And I just sort of like collapsed to the floor. And then, I ended up eating a peppermint and was just having a munch on that, constantly.
Wow.
Before, what was it?
I'm glad that worked for you, and I'm glad that he was there too, because I know that could be scary,
Yeah. Yes. And like I hadn't even told my parents or anybody. Like I was supposed to meet my mom for church, and like I was like, I can't tell her like that I'm feeling terrible today. Like, so it was really hard, but yeah, he was able to be there for me, and ended up being fine. But the whole time I was just like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna throw up in her car, and like she's gonna think I'm like actually sick. Like, so it was something. But really that was the only time with that pregnancy that I really got any kind of not like really sick. Like most of the time it was just like if I ate something, like I would immediately want to spit it back out and be like, nope, that's not what I'm eating. I had a lot of food aversions. I hated chicken. And I feel like I still am. I'm getting a little bit better back into it, but my first one is almost 4, and I still like cannot really taste chicken. Like I'm
the same way about chicken. It's something about it. I don't know.
I'm like, I bit into it was a chicken wing, like a boneless chicken wing whenever I was pregnant with her, and I spit it back out, and I was like, I will never do that again. Like that was the worst thing in my life. And then I'm still like, if a chicken like tastes funny, I'm like, not for me. But really, other than that, I mean, that was the only time I feel like I really had any kind of major sickness. Then as I progressed, I'm trying to think, I did, um, I'm trying to think or like, how everything went in line. So at one point, I remember I went for my anatomy scan and they told me that they thought she had like cysts on her brain. And, of course, they like didn't say anything in the ultrasound. They said everything looked okay and that we were just going to need to review things with our midwife. And that's who I saw a midwife, who I have seen like forever. I've seen her for years. Um, and so I trust her, you know, very well. And she brought us back into the room and she just said, something looks a little abnormal in her brain. It looks like maybe she has cyst or something on her brain. And we just want to send you to like a high risk doctor just in case so they can have a clearer image. So, of course, I went and like cried myself to sleep every night until I had that.
Yeah.
But luckily, like they told us that they were going to have us wait for 8 weeks to see if like it developed or whatnot and try to recheck it. But then they ended up just being like, no, we'll go ahead and see, and so they got us in within like a week after. And it was so cool though, because I mean, of course, we were terrified walking in, and they had her up on the screen, and just sort of like looking at her.
Yeah.
And for the first time she had kicked like really hard, we saw it on
Oh,
the
cool.
ultrasound. So like I felt it, I saw it on my stomach, and then we saw it through the camera. So like it was just like, wow. Like even my husband was like, oh my gosh, like I really just saw her. I'm like, yes, like I had felt flutters and stuff like that, but nothing that hard. So it was pretty interesting. But they ended up saying like everything was fine. Like they weren't sure. They were like, maybe if they were there, it went away. Like we're not really sure what has happened. So we thought that was a major miracle, that nothing
Amazing.
was wrong. And then after that, I ended up failing my glucose test a few weeks later. Had to redo it again, and then almost failed it the second time, but we escaped on by. I just would have had to watch what I ate. But overall, I mean, everything pretty much went pretty perfectly. Um, Trying to think. Um, Now, my whole plan was that I wanted to go natural. I didn't want any kind of, induction or, anything. I just wanted to go into labor on my own. And as far as I could, I wanted to try to labor naturally. Of course, I was a first time mom. So I was like, if I need the epidural, like I can get one, but I'm going to try not to. So I guess fast forwarding to the labor part, me and my husband, it was the day before. So she was supposed to be due on June 26th. It was June 25th. I had woken up at 4 a.m. and was just very restless. Like I didn't really, at the time, I didn't really know what was going on. Like I just thought like, oh great, I'm up for the day. It's 4 o'clock in the morning and I'm up. Like something's going on. I don't know. But I just sort of felt off. And I was like, okay, well, and my friend had told me, if you get in the shower and, you still feel like that, like most likely you are in labor.
Yeah.
So I was like, well, I'm up for the day. I might as well just jump in the shower and get my day going. So I got in the shower and I still sort of felt like just off, like not really achy, but just like something, I don't know. I just felt really off. And I was like, okay, like, I don't know. So like I waited a few hours before I even said anything to my husband, but then he got up and we had to go and help my friend drop his car off to get worked on or whatnot. So we met him out to like the car place, and I ended up telling my husband, I was like, like I'm just feeling a certain type of way, but I'm not really sure. Like, I'm just wanting to keep that in your mind just in
Yeah.
case. And like, just let and he was like, okay, well, we'll see how it goes. I'm like, yeah. And so a little bit later, like we waited and he picked up the car, or we dropped off his car and everything. And then we ended up like, me and my husband and his friend went to Waffle House that morning for breakfast while we were waiting on his car to be done worked on. And at that point, like I was like, I couldn't really sit. I
Oh,
was like, not, I needed to stand and like sway a little bit.
yeah.
And that was, I mean, that was probably around 10 o'clock. So it had been, a while. And I was like, and I just remember like I constantly felt like I had to go to the bathroom. I was running to the bathroom and I was sitting down. I was like, I don't know. Like, do I need to go to the bathroom? Like, what is going on? I'm not really sure, but like something's happening. And I just kept telling my husband, like, I don't know what's going on, but like, this might be for real or it might not be, but like, I don't know.
I
I'm
love
just really
first babies. Like with first babies, you don't know what's going on.
right. Yes. Like, I'm just like, am I constipated? Am I like
Yeah.
really to use the bathroom? Like, what is going on right now? But I was just like, it just sort of snuck up to me because like within the last hour, it was just like I went from like nothing to like, I can't sit without being uncomfortable. And I remember the lady behind the counter just looked at me and she was like, "Hun, when are you due?" I was like, "Tomorrow." She's like, "Oh Lord." She's like, "You're about to have this baby in my restaurant." And I was
In
like,
Waffle House.
"Hope not." I do not. And like then like after that, like my husband's friend was like, "Oh my God, like leave me here. I don't care. I will walk back. Like, please take her to the hospital. Like, please take her to the hospital right now. Like, I will just sit here." And we were like, "No, like I won't be having a baby in the Waffle House. Like, let me just see how this goes and then I'll call my midwife." And then, you know, things sort of progressed after that. We dropped him back off, and then my husband was gonna have to get ready to go to work because he worked second shift, and it was probably about, I don't know, about 12:30 when we got back to our house, and I was like, I really don't wanna stay here." I said, "Let's just go to the park down the street and, like, walk." And he was like, "Okay," and he had about, 2 hours before he had to leave, and, I was just like, "Okay, I'm gonna walk around," and so at that point, like, it got way more intense. And I was like, okay, like, and I kept telling him, I'm like, I have to go potty. Like, I have to go back. Like, you need to take me because like the park that we were at didn't have a bathroom. And so I was like, I need you to take me back to the house, which was like 5 minutes down the road. So it wasn't a huge deal, but I was just like, take me back. So then I got back and I would sit down. And I'm like, nothing is happening. Like, I have no idea. And then we would go back to the park and like poor thing, like he was just driving me back and forth because I was like, I don't know what's happening. And he was just like he was so good. He was just there, like walking around with us. And at one point I was like, okay, like I may need to call my mom and let her know like what's happening. And I started timing the contractions and they were coming like every 5 minutes. And I was like, okay. So I went back to the house and I called my midwife and I was like, "Hey, like they're about like 5 to 6 minutes apart. Like, what do I need to do?" And she was like, "Yeah, you may want to go ahead and grab your stuff and come on in." And I was like, "Okay." And so, I mean, that was, for a couple of hours at least that was happening. And so I was like, "Okay." So we were my husband, a little bit of a funny part is I like am inside and my husband, he loves his grass and he is a grass dude. He, you know, is all about his grass. And so I'm inside and I'm like talking to her. And so I'm like, I holler out the door and I'm like, "Hey, like, she says we need to come into the hospital." And he was like, "Okay, well, let me put this stuff on the grass real quick." And he's got some like sprayer on his back and he's like spraying around the yard. And I'm like, "Okay, don't mind me. I've got the suitcase, I've got the pillows, like loading the car all by myself." And I was just like, "Yeah, that's my husband. Like, he's too worried about that grass. Like, can't let that grass die in 24 hours." Like, I was just like, "Oh, Lord." And so we got all the stuff and packed it up and we got on the road. And then by the time I got to the hospital, so the hospital was like not even a 45-minute drive, maybe at most 45 minutes if we were stuck in traffic, but it was like a Tuesday. So it wasn't a huge, day full of traffic at, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And so we got there, and at that point, it was like 2 to 3 minutes. My contractions were 2 to 3 minutes apart. And I was like, oh my gosh, like they were very close. They weren't as intense as like my second birth, but that's another story. But they were ramping up. Well, then they were like, well, we're going to put you in triage and monitor you for an hour and see how quickly your contractions are coming. So they stayed about 2 to 3 minutes. So they were like, okay. And I went from like a 2 centimeters when they first checked me to a 4 centimeters when I first got there, or from the hour that I was there.
Yeah.
And then they were like, okay, yeah, we're going to admit you. You're definitely in labor. And so I was admitted, and then they put me into a room and they like hooked me up to some monitors and stuff. And the my midwife wasn't there. And the midwife that was there was like, she came in and checked on me, and she was like, oh yeah, like your waters are bulging.
Mhm.
Um, just bounce on that ball for a while. Like you'll probably get them to break on their own. But if you don't, by any chance, if you want to call me throughout the night, I can come in and break your waters. Just tell the nurse. And she was like, I don't mind at all. And I was like, okay, that's great. Um, um, so, the night progresses. I'm doing good. Just keeping my, faith and rest whenever I can. And just sort of walking around the hallways and doing my thing. And the nurse at night was not great.
No.
Like, she was very all over. Like, my parents were there, like, my sister was there helping me, my mom was there, and then my husband, of course. And they were like, we were in and out of the showers and doing my thing. And the nurse, like, she would say something and then she'd be like, she would backtrack. She would be like, okay, well, yeah, like, you're not allowed to eat anything, but like, I can get you some water or I can get you some soup. And I'm like, yeah, like, that's great. I haven't eaten since this morning, Waffle House. I'm really hungry. And so she was like, okay, well, then she like brought it to me, and it was like a pack. Like, she didn't make it for me. So like my husband went out there and like made it for me. And then she came back and was like, you're not supposed to be eating that. And I'm like, but you just brought this to me. Like, I don't understand. And she was like, well, I guess it's okay. And I'm like, well, it better be because I'm starving. Like,
Right.
And she was like, well, you can have a popsicle. I'm like, okay. And so it was just like very back and forth. Well, then it ended up like it was probably 3 o'clock in the morning, and I was miserably tired. And I was just like, okay, like, can you please call the midwife? She said she didn't mind, but like, I'm in like full on active labor. Like, my contractions were coming every 2 minutes and had been for hours. And I was just like, I can't rest. And I was over it. And so I was just like, can you please call her and just have her come and break my water? And the nurse was like, oh no, she'll get mad at me. I can't do that. And I'm like, well, she told me before she left that she didn't mind at all, that she was the doctor on, or the midwife on call. I said, so can you please just give her a call? And she's like, no, I'm not allowed to do that. She's not going to like that very much, and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, I don't really care. Like, I need you to do it. And she just would not. And then she told me, like, no, you just need to pack up your things and go home. Like, I just need to discharge you.
What?
Yes. Yes. Like, I was like, yo, like, I have been here for probably, I don't know, probably going on like 8 hours at that point. I was like, no, I am not going to like leave. Like, I live 45 minutes away. Like, I'm
Have
not
the baby in the
I'm
car.
not doing this.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, no,
What
thank
is
you.
going on right now?
Yes, exactly. I was like, no, you're crazy. And so I was just like trying to tough it through. And then she was like, well, it was 5 o'clock or something like that. She was like, well, your other midwife from your doctor's office is going to be coming in at like 8 a.m. So if you'll just hold off till then, like that's just like 2 or 3 more hours, like you can just wait. And I'm like, oh, that's so easy for you to say. I'm like, let me just
Yeah.
wait, And I'm and I just felt like a horrible pressure. Like I just kept feeling horrible, horrible pressure in my back and in my bottom.
Mhm.
And I was like, I don't know. And I'm 110% believe I was having a back labor, but like no one would help me. And so, like, I think looking back, I'm like, there could have been so many positions I could have gotten in that like would have helped with a back labor, but like no one was there to help me. And I didn't have a doula. And so it was just like terrible pain. Um, and finally at 8 a.m., the other midwife from my practice was there and she came in and was like, how are we doing, mama? I'm like, I am not doing good. Like, I need you to get this baby out of here. I
Yeah.
want my water broken. Give me the epidural. I do not care. Like, get her out. And so she was like, okay, like I heard it. We're going to do it. So they went ahead and got me the epidural. And then they ended up breaking my water. Well, the epidural went okay. Nothing major for me, at least. I mean, I was just so relieved to try to
Right.
get pain relief. And then my husband was like, the smell. He was like, I can't look at it. I don't want to smell it. Like, I was like, I don't even know what you're talking about. Like, I just get it in there. Like, I have no idea. Um, and then, um, I don't know. It worked for a little bit and then it ended up stopping. So they broke my water right after. And like, I felt it, but I didn't really feel it. Like, I just felt like a tug and then a whole gush of water, like nothing major, just maybe a little pop. Um, and then the water broke. And then they immediately saw that she had meconium in the water and they were like, oh no, like baby is in full distress. And I'm like, yeah, like probably is because she's been trying to like come out of my bottom this whole time. And I'm like, something was off and that nurse would not talk to me. So like that made us all panic. But she was like, well, um, I think they gave me like some antibiotics, but I had also tested positive for strep B. So I think I was already on antibiotics for that. And then they were just, monitoring her and whatnot. And they hooked me up and then they gave me Pitocin and I'm trying to think, labor ended up stalling. So I was like a 7 when she had checked me that morning. And then like 3 or 4 hours later, I was still at like a 7.5. Like I was not going anywhere.
Yeah.
So, and then at that point, I don't even think it was, 2 or 3 hours later, something like that. All of my pain came coming back. Like it, and I was like, oh my God. Like it was terrible pain and I was screaming. And then, like, my thing, like the buzzer on the back, like, I don't even know how it all worked, I guess, but like, I guess the medicine just has to keep flowing through the IV or through
Yeah.
the
That's right.
thing for the epidural. And it just kept saying, like, bag empty, please refill, please refill. And I'm like, like screaming. And I'm like, get it on, like, go find someone. Like, I don't care. And then, like, I guess anesthesiologist or whatnot came back in and then I don't know. She was very disheartening and she just looked at me and she was like, honey, that's just what labor feels like. And I'm like, no, it's not. Like 10 minutes ago, I didn't feel anything.
Yeah.
And now I feel everything. And trust me, I've been in labor for 28 hours at this point. Like, I think I know what labor feels like. Like, I was not just, you know, I'm like, no, I know what the epidural felt like, and now it's gone. And that thing keeps screaming at me like it says it's empty. So I need you to fix it. And so, anywho, it was a bit of a disaster for that. But I don't know, that was probably like 12 on Wednesday. And then it wasn't until about 5:30 when I like finally started to get some rest. Like I was so uncomfortable and they kept coming in, like switching me up and doing all of this stuff. Well, then probably about probably about like 4:30 or 5 is when they brought me a peanut ball and they put me on the peanut ball or put the peanut ball in between my legs and got me situated on my side. And I actually ended up falling asleep for the first time since 4 o'clock the day before. And so I was so exhausted. Well, then within 30 minutes, I woke up and so my dad and my brother in law had come to like wait it out that day. And then they ended up leaving at 5. They were like, well, obviously it's going to be a while. Like, you never know. Because they had checked me like an hour before, probably around like 4:30. They had checked me and they were like, okay, like you've progressed to about like an 8.5. So I went from like essentially probably around a 5 to an 8.5 within like 6 hours. And then I'm trying to think. Yeah. So at 5 o'clock, they like ended up leaving and going to like Hibbett Sports down the road. And at 5:30, I think it was 5:36, I remember waking up and I was like, okay, something's happening. I don't know what's happening, but something's happening. And the nurse came over and she was amazing. That nurse was amazing. And she was like, oh, mama, it's ready. She was like, here she comes. And I was like, okay. So like my mom and dad, like my mom called my dad back and was like, you're gonna need to come back. He's like, we're just walking in. She was like, well, you need to come back. Like baby's crowning. And they were like, we see her head. And so they came right back. And I mean, I pushed her out in 11 minutes and she was born at 4, what was it? 4:50. Wait, was it 4? Oh, why can't I think about it now?
Number.
4:56. Yeah, see, I'm so terrible. Like, look at thinking back now. So it must have been 4:30. And so I said 5:30. So I guess it was 4, yeah, 4 to 4:30. And then I ended up pushing her out in 11 minutes and it was 4:56. Yes, because she's 6:26 and it was 4:56. So yeah, it was 4:56 in the afternoon when she was born. And it was 11 minutes of pushing total. It was 36 hours total of of labor and 11 minutes of pushing. So it was a long labor, but a quick pushing, which sometimes I know that takes about 2 hours for some people.
Yeah.
So it was very, very quick. Um, and I did feel a lot of the birth. Like I didn't, I thought I wouldn't be able to feel anything. Like I have been in a birth doing photography. So I do photography on the side and I did a birth photography. And when the girl got the epidural, like she thought her legs were falling off the bed. Like she was like so numb. She didn't think her legs were even attached to her. Like we had to keep showing her legs.
Yeah.
And so like her epidural worked so well. And mine, I still felt like the ring of fire and they made me like stop there. I didn't end up tearing it except for like I got one stitch and I tore upwards, which I didn't even think was possible. So that's definitely a thing. But I ended up tearing upwards. But they just did like one quick stitch right after, and I felt that. That was terrible. That was really bad.
Things that just don't tell you can happen, you know?
Right. Yes. I mean, and that was this thing was my baby was there. So I was just like
Right.
so overwhelmed with that I wasn't really concentrating on it. I just felt like the stick, at first, like that first little poke, and then it was over. Um, but she did, because she did have that meconium. I was like pushing and I had my eyes closed and was just like bearing down. And at one point, I opened my eyes and the room was filled with doctors and nurses in capes, like in like the scrubs that you wear into like a like surgery. And I was just like, what is happening? Like, I was like, but I was so like, I don't care. Like, get her out of me. Like, I just want her out. And I just was trying not to pay attention to that. But then there was two doctors on either side of me, one in front of my husband, and they were like, as soon as she came out, they put her on my chest, and the doctors were like, cut the cord, cut the cord, cut the cord. And I wanted delayed cord clamping. Like, my husband was like, well, that's not what she wanted. They were like, no, she's in distress, like, cut the cord. And like, my husband's like, I don't know what to do. So
Yeah.
he went ahead, like, cut the cord as quickly as he could, and he did it. And it was just like this whole big thing. And, they flip flopped her around on my belly and checked her breathing and stuff like that and suctioned her for a minute. And she was crying and was fine, but she was very, very blue, and the cord was wrapped around her neck twice. So that, of course, scared me. And stuff like that. But she ended up, it was so sweet though, because she crawled, and I have seen videos of like the newborn baby crawl, and they do. She crawled up to me and laid on my neck and like wrapped her little arms around me, and I have a sweet picture of it. And she was giving me a hug for the first time, and it was the sweetest little thing ever. Yes. It was amazing. And then I guess maybe about 30 minutes later, we ended up getting her to latch. And she did pretty well. Now postpartum slash like, still in the hospital and dealing with all of that, like that was very hard. Um, when they would come in and like push on my belly, that hurt. And just getting her to latch, like she had a much harder time latching than she did the first, which I know is actually very typical. Usually they, come out and then they latch, and they sort of, either forget or they get, you know, something happens and they sort of just slack off a little bit, I guess. Um, and so I know it's harder for them to like latch and stuff once they've been born for a little while after the first couple of times. So she just didn't want to open her mouth wide, and like my nipples began to like look like little lipstick, um you know like the tops of the lipstick. And they told me like a million times, they were like, don't let it look like that, like that's when she's latching wrong and all this stuff. And everybody looked at her mouth and they were like, oh, we don't see any ties or anything like that. And I have no idea, but she just had a very, but she does, and like I did find out, like she had a very narrow palate, which was probably why it hurt so bad. Um, and like now, like her teeth are all cramped together because it's so compact in there. And so that was probably why it hurt so bad. But we did a mixture of nursing and pumping, and she breastfed up until she was about 6 months old, and then I still breastfed, but I just pumped until she was 15 months old. So that journey it went very well. Not exactly like I hoped, but I still got to give her my breast milk, and that was all that mattered to me. Um, and we still had some nursing times and stuff. So that was amazing. And then, I mean, she's been an angel, I mean, as far as all of that goes, she's great. She's a healthy little almost 4-year old now. And then yeah, so it went overall like really well. It was very chaotic. There was a lot of nurses coming in and out whenever it was postpartum, and that was very stressful. It was really a night and day deal with my first and second. Like there was still a lot of trauma, I guess, not like major, there was more major trauma with my second
Oh,
than my first, but not much trauma, but just like with my first, it was just very like stressful, and like I just felt like I didn't get a lot of support.
yeah.
And that's what I really wanted the second go around. And we'll talk about that soon. But um yeah, everything, I mean, overall, it went really well. I got to labor as much as I needed to with her until it was just too much. There was a few bumps along the way, but overall, like my baby was happy and healthy
Yeah.
on me after that. So it went, could have gone worse. And that's, I'm so thankful that everything worked out in the long run. So I was on the bed and she checked. So she was like, oh my goodness, well, I'm going to have to find the nearest midwife. I'll have to call yours, but she's not going to make it here in time. And so she finds a doctor. The doctor comes in, and I'm like, I'm didn't want to lay on my back. So I'm like leaned over the back of the bed, and like my bottom's just up in the air, like I'm butt naked at this point. And the doctor just comes in, and she was like, hey mama, how you doing? I'm like, not good.
I've been
And
better.
yeah, I'm like I just am screaming, and I'm pretty sure I'm just screaming like, help me, help me. And um she was like, you're doing great. She was like, you're doing this all on your own. She was like, so, I will be here to catch the baby whenever you're ready. Just go with what you feel. And I'm like, okay. And so, um, I mean, I think it was a total of 8 minutes of me pushing. So it was very, very quick.
That's a new record for you. I'll
Yes,
do this.
yes. It was a very much quicker labor, or much quicker birth.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it was good in the grand scheme of things to be that quick. And so I just, and my doula was videoing and stuff for me too. Um, but yeah, I just kept screaming, help me, help me, help me, which I don't really remember. But I was just, I guess because I was so in distress, like I thought something was happening, and
Yeah.
I just was screaming, help me, somebody help me. And they were like, you're doing good, like you can hear them. And so she ends up coming out pretty at one point. I was like, is she out yet? Like I like remember like bearing down. I was like, is she out? Like, is she out? Like I felt something, and they were like, that's her head, but you still gotta push her body out. And I was like,
You're like, I
okay.
can do this. Let's do this.
Yeah. And so I was like, all right. And then they were like, okay, she's out. And I told, like, my husband was very good. Like, he was like, okay, she wants the baby on the chest. Like, she wants him to send immediately and everything. And they were like, as long as everything's, okay, like, we're fine with that. But since the way I was laying, or, laboring, I wasn't laboring on my back like I was my first one. And
Yeah.
so they, I had to like flip my leg over the doctor so they could pull, her out the rest of the way without getting her all tangled up in my leg. And they they said, hold on, we just got to check something real quick. And they took her off. And like in that moment, like I was so, I don't know, like thinking back, I'm like, what happened to me? Like, I don't, because like I like had given birth, but like I didn't even like I did pay attention, and I feel like that was
Yeah.
terrible of me, but like at the same time, like I just remember focusing on the clock, and it was like 1:37 in the morning.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't even but like 25 minutes from me like getting into the room to like having the baby. And I wasn't even like, oh, I don't know, I'm gonna finish this
Yeah.
thought.
But you're
But I
only at
was
3 centimeters. So yeah.
right, yeah, yeah, exactly. I'm like, are you telling me I went from 3 centimeters to 10 in like 30 minutes? Like, that's crazy. Like, it could have happened. I'm not saying it couldn't, but I just think that's just nuts. But yeah, so I just remember like focusing on the clock, and I remember like, oh, what time is it? What time is it? And they're like, it's 1:37. And I was like, she has my dad's birth. Like, I'm like on video saying, she has my dad's birthday. Like, oh my gosh. she made it to my dad's birthday. And so they share the same birthday and stuff. And I was just
That's
over the moon about
precious.
it. And yes, um, but she was okay. I don't really know what happened. Like there was two nurses working on her, I guess. Like they didn't say she wasn't breathing, but they did say the cord was wrapped around her neck. And
Yeah.
so I don't really know. And then they um they got her and put her on me, and we sat there and had some skin to skin time, which was great. And during that time, as soon as they handed her to me, that same nurse looks at me and was like, trying to put in the information. She was like, "Oh, hi," and like, "I haven't even admitted you." And I'm like, "I know, like you." Like I was never in, like I just kept thinking, I'm like, I shouldn't have a hospital bill then. Like if I was
I
never
did this by
admitted,
myself.
yeah, I'm like, yes, I did not have any support. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Um, so yeah, but I was very proud of myself that I ended up having a labor without an epidural this time.
you did it. It's awesome.
Yeah, so yeah, that was amazing. Not really the way I was expecting, but I'm like, I didn't really have a choice, but it also helped me succeed my goals.
Yeah.
So, it happened real quick. Um, yes, I did it, and she came out and was beautiful, and we ended up latching within, like, 10 or 15 minutes, I think, and she is 13 months old tomorrow, or
Oh,
no,
yay.
yeah, she's 13 months old today, and we are still breastfeeding, and it is going great.
Awesome.
And she's great. She walked at 10 months old, and stuff like that. So she's great. Postpartum was, I guess, harder, especially at first. Like I just remember being so torn up about, the birth and the way everything happened, and just like, having my doula, but not really having my doula except for like the last 30 minutes of my birth. Like it was just, and I had all of my bag of goodies of things to help me, but because I couldn't bring in my stuff to triage, like I didn't have any like essential oils or anything that I brought to like help me labor naturally. So there was just a lot of stuff that I got sort of robbed with with my second one. Um which I'm like sort of over it a little bit now.
Yeah.
Still mad at the hospital and that nurse, but
No, specifically, we're all
overall,
mad. Everybody listening is mad.
yeah. Yes, like it was very rough. I don't know what was happening. And like I have a friend that actually works at the hospital, and I was sort of talking to her about it, and she like named who it was. And I was like, it was like, yeah, we've had some issues. I was like, oh, like this does not need to be happening. But yes, so anywho, um, but yeah, so um, it was good. Postpartum, like I said, was hard. Emotionally, I guess. Physically, I bounced back, I mean, way fast. Like with my first, I was on antibiotics and hooked up, and I had
Yeah,
the epidural and all of that. And so I was very swollen. I was
yeah,
very, puffy and everything for like, I felt like honestly, like a month or two after I had her. Like it lasted a while. But then with my second, I guess because I didn't really have anything, you know, it was very, I dropped the weight pretty quickly. Like, I'm still bouncing. I mean, I say that I'm still bouncing back today, but like, I feel like my uterus is still really big, but I need to work out. But I mean, overall, I mean, I didn't have any swelling. I didn't really have, bleeding too much. I mean, everything went much better. I feel like postpartum physically, wise with my second. Emotionally, not so much, but physically, I think it went well. Um, and then, of course, I had more time with her this time around. My second one, I didn't get to take too much of a long, maternity leave, but with this one I did. And I also had my 2-year old. So that was, being a second mom life, trying to figure
Yeah.
out that and everything. And so that was sort of hard. Um, I remember the first day I was left alone with both girls, and I like got them both down for a nap and me have a nap, and like we all just napped together. That was the one and only time I've ever gotten it.
At one
And
time,
I thought like day one, I'm like, man, I'm doing great today. Like I nailed it. And I've never nailed it since. So like I cannot get both of my kids to nap at the same time
yeah,
ever.
I feel that spiritually.
But yeah, so everything after that point has been pretty good. Breastfeeding, of course, had its challenges, which that was the other. So it's crazy because I had more struggles like breastfeeding, like with pain with my first, and like she didn't really have any ties except for just like the narrow palate. With my second, she had a much wider palate, but she also had, or she still has, a lip tie on top. And I remember, and like, I was looking back at like the text messages. It was actually on her birthday, just trying to go back through and like remember what all had happened. Um, but I went back and like was messaging my doula and was like, I'm pretty sure like she has a lip tie. And like she was like, oh, like I'm not really sure that she does. And a couple of the doctors looked at her and they were like, no, she doesn't have a lip tie or anything. And I'm like, I think she does. And then I don't know, probably when she was like 6 months old or a little bit older, I had taken a picture of when her teeth were coming in. And I flipped her lip up, and I wasn't really paying attention for that reason. But then my sister, who did have her baby, she was asking me about lip ties. Went back and started looking, and I was like, oh my gosh, like my girl clearly has a bad lip tie. Like, I mean, it's like stuck underneath her lip. Like it's like a third degree. I don't know how all of that works, but it's a pretty severe one. And I'm like, wow, like, I mean, we haven't really had any problems breastfeeding. She did great. Um, but she did have a ton of gas and she had a lot of spit ups, way more than my first ever did. But I still thought that was really wild and I don't know if she has a tongue tie too. I haven't really been able to look very well. But I've also seen like whenever she sticks her tongue out, it doesn't go out very far. So I'm like, I wonder, I don't know. But
That's
yeah,
interesting.
so I will definitely say that if they think their baby has a lip tie, you need to go to the pediatric dentist or an ENT. That's what I have found out, to get them formally assessed. A pediatrician, even the lactation consultants, no one identified it.
Right.
And like I said, we've been successful. I haven't been in pain. Nothing ever. It felt way more natural than
Yeah.
my first ever did, honestly. Never, knock on wood, we're still breastfeeding, but like I haven't had, mastitis or anything like that. I think I've maybe had like, I don't know, I've had like a lump, which I think was maybe a clogged duct, but it came through or whatever. So nothing really bad. But
That's great. But thanks for that information too. That might help someone along the way. And I want
yes.
to thank you for sharing both of your stories with us tonight, and taking time out of your day so that everyone can hear your journey, because
Yeah.
that's what makes you special and your family special. So I really appreciate the time you took with us.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And,
Of course.
I hope this helped some mom, as they listened, or multiple moms, hopefully, just sort of gain a better understanding. And I hope, they learn that they need to, have a voice or have someone else, like, whenever you're in the thick of it, having that extra help. And a doula is a lifesaver for sure. Um, as long as they have access to you. But yeah, so I'm grateful for you having me on today. And I hope that this was beneficial for someone.
It was. I'm sure it helped me because my third baby was just like your second. The nurse was very dismissive of everything I said, and she's like, "I'm not checking you again." And she said, "There's no way you're going to be able to have the baby natural because the way you're wimping out." And in about 30 minutes, his head came up between my legs, and she was just like doubtful and was very hateful. My husband's like, "You're an idiot."
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
crazy.
Oh my
I didn't know
God.
he could progress for so quickly. That was, rare for me, but he's my third, so it makes sense. But
Right.
he made me feel better I mean, just me hearing, I'm like, oh, cool. Somebody else that understands how I felt because
Right.
being told you're only 4 centimeters, 5 centimeters, and you're like, well, maybe I can't handle it. And then
Yes. You absolutely can. Like your body is made to do it. And like I just feel like there's so many like people that are the fear mongers. Like they just,
yeah, I
you know,
agree.
are like they just want to make you think that you can't. And it's like you can't. Like if that's what you want, like I understand going in and be like, I don't want to feel the pain. Like this is
I
not
get
what it's about. Go for it. But like if this is something you want, I feel like you should have all the support in the world.
that. Yes.
Absolutely. Yes.
I appreciate you so much, and I hope you have a wonderful night.
Thank you so much. I
Thank
appreciate it.
you. We'll
You
talk
too.
soon.